Imagine for a moment a world without art, without dance, opera, literature, poetry. That world would be a very, very dull place.
Today on the show, we have Stephen Myers, author and documentary filmmaker, researching how the Great Pyramid was assembled using water locks and barges, as well as how the Great Pyramid operated as an efficient water pumping system. Stephen Myers has been a guest and interviewed on over 130 radio talk shows and is the founder of the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation, which is an Oregon based 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the development of decentralized, energy efficient, non polluting energy technologies. You could read more about his research at www.thepump.com. Stephen, thanks for taking the time to talk with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so I guess we'll get down to the nitty gritty. So, which alien race actually constructed the pyramids?
Well, it'd have to be the really, really tall ones because it's a tall building.
I was saying, that's the one thing that was a breath of fresh air when I kind of stumbled across your information, started reading up on you, is that you actually have a very plausible idea of how the Great Pyramids were made. And most folks I talk to that claim they know the secrets of the Great Pyramids are just way out in left field. And I was very relieved that, you're actually a sensible guy.
I appreciate that. You mentioned aliens right off the bat, but people that contend that aliens built the Great Pyramid are also saying ancient people weren't smart enough to build the Great Pyramid, but they don't say that out loud. So that's something to remember. That's kind of the flip side of the ancient aliens idea.
Yeah, I always I don't know, that was something that always kind of bugged me about the whole ancient aliens thing, is that you're kind of whitewashing a large portion of history, and you're kind of taking away the accomplishments of, these primitive peoples and their stoneworking skills, and you're just kind of filling it in with like American folklore. And I always found the actual history and skill sets that these people had to develop far more interesting than any kind of conspiracy theory or mythology that's out there.
Well, I certainly agree. I wrote 2 books and produced 2 documentaries about how ancient geniuses, not aliens, uh, assembled the Great Pyramid. They went through all the trouble of constructing this large public works projects, and they didn't need, I don't think, alien help to do it.
Yeah, so I guess how did you get interested first in kind of the history of the pyramids? What kind of drew you to it? Was it kind of a childhood fascination, or was it something you kind of got into later on in life?
Mainly as an early adult, young adult. My technical background, my background is technical. I have a technical degree, amateur radio operator,
Mhm.
FCC, general commercial class license, and a whole bunch of certificates and all of that. So very technical background, and I collect antique gasoline engines. I like that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And when in high school, when I studied history, I was more interested in the range that airplanes could fly, and the bomb loads the bombs could and the battleships and the submarines. I was interested in that more than politics. So if a person likes history and technology, pretty soon they're going to look at the pyramid, because it's a 45-story skyscraper built in very ancient times, and it exhibits a lot of high technology.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of folks often attribute the Romans with, first developing like water locks and barge systems, as well as, aqueduct systems. But your theory is that the Egyptians were able to create this sort of system to be able to, I mean, was it mostly for like moving the materials of the pyramids, or what do you think the purpose of the pyramids were?
Well, when you say Egyptians, who built the Great Pyramid is beyond the scope of my research, as well as when it was built. So it may have been built by people in the Valley of the Nile that were pre-dynastic times or whenever. But yes, they used water locks and barges to move a massive amount of stone and heavy payloads from the catch basin in the Nile all the way up to the building site. So it's interesting that the Erie Canal here in the United States was 4.5 feet deep, but the barges had a capacity of 70 tons. So in the 1830s, people could move 70-ton payloads, but here in modern times, Egyptology has never moved a 70-ton payload 1 inch.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you think there's so much misconceptions around the pyramids in general? I mean, do you think it's just the I don't want to say false information, but the preconceived notions of a lot of Egyptologists over the years?
Well, Egyptology, its genesis of that science was tomb robbers. And, back in the 1800s and that type of thing, they were stealing things from tombs and selling them to museums.
Yeah.
And the difference between a tomb robber and an Egyptologist is that a tomb robber doesn't have a college education, but an Egyptologist does. But the main reason why there's so much misunderstanding, misconceptions, and falsehoods, misinformation that has shrouded the Great Pyramid is because it's been studied using some rather poor research methods. And those poor research methods produce false information. So that's it right there.
Yeah, and I also think that has a lot to do with like the occult reformation of the 1800s and just or the I should say like the 1860s to 1880s, and just the Egyptian craze that Britain and some of these European countries had at the time. What really fueled that grave robbing that you were talking about. But to kind of fuel this craze, a lot of the academic researchers of history at the time, um they wrote a lot more about mythology than they did actual history when it comes to that. So I feel like the pop culture craze of Egyptology of that specific period really kind of set back Egyptology as a science in general.
Oh, yeah. Egyptology is actually a science in crisis because it refuses to use the scientific method, certainly in regards to how the Great Pyramid was assembled. They will declare edicts about a big ramp
Mhm.
and about strong backed knuckle draggers and that type of thing. But in terms of producing any type of demonstration, they are sorely lacking. So a lot of people that I know that's past the 8th grade do not even believe this precision stone cutting using hand tools because it's never been demonstrated. And another thing that has fueled the misconception surrounding the Great Pyramid is before that craze in terms of Egyptology that you were talking about, there was this idea that the Great Pyramid was somehow associated with the Holy Bible.
Hmm.
That the pyramid inch and the Great Pyramid confirms Bible prophecy, and the Ark of the Covenant was stored in the coffer and all of that, and the Bethlehem angle, you can look that up, that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Great Pyramid predicts the birthplace of Jesus and all of that. And that's all derived using a whole host of very poor research methods. And it's all hokum, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, once you start, looking at, the serious history of Egypt and, and the different dynasties, it really starts to shatter all those biblical myths that were kind of perpetuated around those times because, I mean, once again, I feel like a lot of that was just trying to make Egyptology or, the aesthetic of Egypt in that time more pleasing to a European audience. But yeah, I mean, even if you look at like the northern tribes and the Hyksos that would have invaded Egypt, briefly during that time, there's absolutely no hard evidence of any sort of Jewish enslavement or anything related to biblical myth, historically in Egyptian history, dynasty to dynasty, and they kept pretty good records for the most part.
Well, they did, but what I'm saying is, I'm talking not about that as much, but about people applying some poor research methods to come up with some conclusions that are blatantly false. They've come up with a lot of correlations between a data point on the Great Pyramid and a data point on the Bible, but those two data points aren't joined with causation, if you will. They're
Right.
just two things that people just see, like a cloud in the sky that looks like a puppy and my puppy. Well, there's no real correlation between those two things. The cloud didn't form to meet the shape of my puppy, and my puppy didn't evolve to match the shape of the cloud. So it's just some correlation that people see, but they're false because they're not derived using valid research methods. So, but that's one other thing that has influenced the study of the Great Pyramid.
Yeah, I mean that's just kind of how the human brain is wired though. Like we want to see patterns everywhere. Going back to conspiracy theorists again, that's one of the that's one of the biggest thing that always frustrates me talking to some of these folks who, hold those ancient alien mythos is that just because, you want to see a pattern, it doesn't necessarily make it valid that, there is a correlation between those two things, because causation doesn't necessarily equal correlation at all.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. So we're kindred spirits on that regards. But the Great Pyramid, though, it was built, and it's like an out of place artifact, if you will. Extreme precision from distant antiquity, and a huge cost to build. So it's there. The stark reality of it has to be resolved. Our ancient ancestors created that, and how they did it, and why would they do such a thing has become my life quest.
Yeah, so I guess let me ask you, from your perspective, what do you think the purpose of the Great Pyramids were? Because you look at like some of the academics of that time, Manly P. Hall and them, they kind of want to incorporate it being built as part of like the Osirian myth. They had the tunnel that goes underneath between the Sphinx and the pyramids. So then when you came up through that middle chamber, you would be coming up on the balcony right as the sun was rising. But that seems like an awfully big project just for some mystery school initiation. So what are your thoughts on why the pyramid was built in the first place?
Well, first of all, there's no tunnel between the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. Both of those they're not connected physically with a tunnel at all in any way. So that's just direct physical evidence. But I think
Right.
the original builders were geniuses from a civilization, and what they wanted was instead of poverty, they wanted prosperity, and instead of a desert, they wanted a garden, and instead of toil, they wanted leisure. So they built this massive structure that using water locks and barges, and they built it as infrastructure that the Great Pyramid was a working machine. And
Hmm.
what that machine did was provided prosperity by being a water pump.
Okay, so let me ask you, how would the water pump work then? Because did was it just like pressure that would build up in like the lower level and like shoot up towards the top, or were they using that to kind of like irrigate valleys?
The original builders were able to provide a water source to the base of the Great Pyramid. Other researchers beside myself feel that there's a fundamental link between water and the Great Pyramid, including Christopher Dunn. And we think
Hmm.
the original builders were able to move water from the upper end of the descending passage down into all the way 100 feet below the Great Pyramid into the subterranean chamber. That chamber was oddly constructed with some unfinished area on one end of this large chamber. And we think that acted like a water break, if you will. And the water came in that chamber on one end and it moved slower on the other end and caused the water to move in a whirlpool, a rather
Hmm.
powerful whirlpool. And it
Hmm.
and the original builders were able to use the property of implosion that Victor Schroeberger talked about. He's the Austrian researcher over there, in the 30s and 40s, who is attributed to have built the engine for the Foo Fighter and all of that. So certainly people know about Victor Schroeberger. Well, they use that force of implosion to move water up to the uh, Grand Gallery. And the Grand Gallery is an airtight chamber. If it wasn't already in a wonder of the world, it would be a wonder of the world. And we think that they were able to use electrolysis in that chamber to separate oxygen and hydrogen. And those two
Hmm.
gases are quite volatile. And when you ignite them, you can, believe it or not, ultimately create a vacuum. So that vacuum helped lift water up in the Grand Gallery. And my books and documentaries talk all about this. And they were able to release that vacuum, and that about 100-ton water piston, if you will, moved back down, and then it compressed water in the Queen's chamber, and then it ultimately went to the King's chamber and out the King's chamber vents. And then the water went down the casing stones through a vent that's now gone because the casing stones are gone. And then the water went to the point of use. So it's kind of a complex process with some check valves and other processes that occur. But my second book, The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine, talks about all that in detail, as well as my second documentary. So yeah, it was a big project, but it had a huge return on investment, and it was well worth building, and provided that water. They used it to, for powering machinery, irrigation, of course, probably to generate compressed air, and a whole host of purposes.
Wow, wow. I mean, yeah, I mean, just the way you described it, like I'm trying to like wrap my mind around like, what a visual representation of that would be. But like, I mean, just like the effects of it. I mean, how do you think that transformed that society? Do you think it was the Great Pyramid that gave, possibly a collection of tribes into the ability to form like one of the first city states?
Well, certainly, I see the Giza Plateau as originally more of a science center or industrial park than a big graveyard. So, but yeah, I'm sure that they had high technology associated with the output of the water, and did everything that our major infrastructure does. The Hoover Dam over there near Las Vegas, all it does is make electricity go through a wire, but the uses of that ability are endless. So it was quite a feat of engineering created by geniuses that was built to improve their own lives and the lives of their children. It had nothing to do with pointing to a star, or that they wanted to tell us that they knew pi. That's what some have suggested. That's a low return on investment to tell us that they knew pi. So
So let me ask you then. I mean, do you think it was, maybe these pre dynasty Egyptians that were able to construct it? Or do you think it was possibly some Sumerian influence?
It was somebody. It could have been built pre last catastrophe, if you will. Maybe before
Mhm.
dynastic Egypt. It could have been before the biblical flood, or before the asteroid strike, or before the political chaos that destroyed that civilization that built it. But they had some certainly some high technology um, that they created, and ultimately used that technology to build their wonder of the world.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, also, ancient people, they were way more advanced than we give them credit for. I mean, particularly when you're looking at, we were talking about it having it be almost an energy source. I mean, you look at like, the Baghdad battery, for instance, right? I mean, they were very aware of how these chemical reactions would interact with each other. Um, so so yeah, so I guess let me ask you then, if you think it was like maybe pre-dynasty, what sort of time frame are you thinking here? I mean, are you thinking back even more, 2500 BC?
Some have suggested that instead of believing what Egyptologists say, that it was 4,500 years ago, give or take 100 years, that it may have been as much as 100,000 years ago. But exactly when, again, is not the focus of my research. And here's
Mhm.
why. Let's say we decided, or let's say we found out absolutely this information. We found out that the Great Pyramids construction started 10,000 years ago from today. Today is the 10,000th anniversary of the start of the construction of the Great Pyramid. Okay, we know that. The very next question is, well, how did they build the Great Pyramid? And why would they do such a thing? Those two questions are what I concentrate on. So another thing people want to know is who built it? Who funded it? What was the leader? What civilization? And let's say we find out it was a guy named Bob. Bob did it. Bob built the Great Pyramid. Okay. Well, the very next thing you're going to ask is, well, how did he do it? And why? Why would he do such a thing? So I don't focus on the who and the when. I know people that have spent their entire careers on those two questions and have gotten nowhere. So that there may not be enough information to find those the answers to those two questions. So there you
Yeah,
go.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, Egyptologists in general have been feuding with a lot of other sciences about that same thing. Primarily, most recently with geologists. So let me ask you, how do you think, your ideas on the Pyramid of Giza is connected with like that Sphinx water erosion hypothesis?
Yes, Dr. Robert Schoch.
Yeah.
Uh, he wrote two books, and brilliant geologist, preeminent in geology. And he studied the Sphinx. He looked at it. It's rock. It's in his wheelhouse, if you will.
Mhm. Yeah.
And based on the erosion, his assessment is that it's older than 4,500 years, much older than dynastic Egypt, and probably pre last ice age, if you will, about 11,000 years ago, 12,000 or so. And he was eviscerated by Egyptologists who treated him unbelievable, just tried to destroy him and everything else. It's just horrible how he was treated. But yeah, it makes sense what Dr. Robert Schoch says. I mean, and I'm not threatened by that at all, like Egyptologists are. So I really have a disdain for the so-called science of Egyptology. In fact, on my YouTube channel, they can see a video I made asking the question, is Egyptology a pseudoscience? And it's been well received, that video. So they can go to my website, thepump.org and click on my YouTube link and watch that video. So yeah, I have no problem with the age of the Sphinx being as old as Dr. Robert Schoch says it is. So
Yeah, I mean, I would take I'm going to take a hard science over, a history or a social science, if you will, any day, because, a hard science, you have physical evidence, right? And you actually have the ability to, test those hypotheses. Primarily with social sciences, dealing with ancient civilizations, you don't really have a way to really test those hypotheses. And even though I would hope that Egyptology has become more academic and reputable over the years, it started off as a pseudoscience for sure.
oh, that's true. Well, there's a lot of things that Egyptology can use the scientific method to corroborate, like workers drug 70-ton payloads up a ramp. And that is a hypothesis. But Egyptology just stops at a hypothesis and says they declare an edict that it's valid, which isn't science. But if they would drag a 70-ton stone or payload up a dirt ramp, then that would lend credence to their stories. But they don't do that. They've never made even a casing stone. Those are the stones that were on the outside of the Great Pyramid that were cut to extreme precision. Never made one. The entire science. Why would they engage in the scientific method? They have never made a single surface like those of the surfaces of a casing stone of the Great Pyramid. Isn't that interesting? They say that stones were moved on barges. Some of the quarries were 400 miles away down the Nile River. They've never moved a heavy payload on or off of a barge. And only in the realm of Egyptology is there a huge disdain for demonstrations. So it's bizarre. I don't know how they get away with it. Maybe because Egyptology happens to be the richest science in the world, with all their priceless artifacts generating income by people buying tickets to come look at them. So colleges that have departments of Egyptology, yeah, I mean, I lose respect for them.
Yeah, you look at their hypothesis of just how this was done with just pure manpower and force. I mean, the amount of people that you would need to be pulling these large blocks. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's cohesive with the populations of these city states that we saw at the time, because you're talking about thousands and thousands of people to be putting in hard labor, and that just doesn't seem feasible.
Well, it's not feasible. That's why Egyptology doesn't engage in the scientific method, because their answers are both impossible and wrong. Now myself, I want to tell you something. I can pick up a full-size car. I can just grab it with my hands and pick it up over my head. Okay. I'm telling you that as a fact. And I will provide a demonstration. I will show you by picking up a Hot Wheels car. Okay. And that's what Egyptologists do. They say, we're going to show you how a 70-ton payload is moved. Here's our 1.5-ton stone we're going to move a few feet. Very disingenuous. Very, very disingenuous. That's like if I owed you $15 and I said, okay, here's 15 dimes. Not, there's a issue of scale, okay? But they get away with it. How do they do it? I don't know. Not long ago, they used to teach phrenology in college. That's the science of the correlations between bumps on people's heads and their character traits. Mm-hmm. Not long ago, less than 100 years, you could get a college degree in phrenology and all of that. But the problem is that science could not withstand the rigors of the scientific method, and it went away. It went poof, it's gone. The ash bin of rejected ideas. And that's what's going to happen to certainly most of Egyptology. It is, sciences come and go, and it just happens to be in crisis. You know, we're kind of like right before, nobody believed phrenology, right before they stopped teaching it, and that's about where we're at with Egyptology.
Yeah, I mean, I have actually one of the phrenology heads up on my shelf that I got at an antique shop, just kind of on my shelf of oddities up there. And I mean, it always gives me a reminder of just how bad science can lead to more bad science, because that was that, and the shape of different skulls and stuff was taken with eugenics. And
Oh yeah,
it's just amazing how
very crazy.
one bad idea can just lead to so much more bad ideas.
That's true. And actually science, they say, it advances funeral by funeral. So they have to, the people have to die off, and the next generation doesn't believe what the generation before believed, but nobody changes their minds. Like with the Piltdown skull, when it was discovered, all of these anthropologists wrote their doctoral thesis on it, but they didn't reject the Piltdown skull for 40 years, because that's when all those guys died off. The next generation of anthropologists, oh no, we don't believe the Piltdown skull. But the point is, no one changes their mind. So we're just waiting for the Egyptologists to die off, and then we can go from there. Egyptology is the biggest hindrance to understanding ancient Egypt.
Yeah, I will agree with you there. So let me ask you, um, when you first started getting into this research, was it like, I guess, kind of what brought the hypothesis forward? Or did you go to Egypt and kind of start looking at the pyramid firsthand and just say, no, this doesn't make sense?
Well, no, I've been to Egypt, of course, and was going back in February, but to lead a tour. But
Mhm.
because of coronavirus, that was canceled. So it's too bad. So yeah, I've been to Egypt, but no, I was just this is, I'm obviously an older guy, and oh, the Great Pyramid. So you go to the library and fill out the little library card, that they used to have, and checked out books
Mhm.
by the experts, Egyptologists. So you read that, and they talk about, oh, they drug these stones and all of that. And so I said, oh, that's fine. All I need to do is see their demonstrations that validate their hypothesis. But I found out something that most people don't know. There's absolutely no demonstrations. They just make this stuff up. They just pull it out of a hat. Oh, there must have been a big ramp, bigger than the Great Pyramid itself, and bigger in volume. And they drug stones up there for no coherent reason, and all of that. How do long open passages and doors on pivots protect a pharaoh's mummy? No
Yeah.
coherent answer. They just tell their stories. They tell you about the hat the pharaoh wore, or they tell you about mummies and all that. The King Tut was buried in a hole in the ground in the Valley of the Kings. Has nothing to do with the Great Pyramid. But on their documentaries on TV, they'll show you the King Tut mask and then fade right to the Great Pyramid. How very disingenuous that is. But so anyway, so I rejected all of that. It's just hokum. It can't be done. Like cows jump. You can read about cows jumping over the moon, but nobody believes it because there's no demonstrations. And that's, cows jumping over the moon is as valid as much of what Egyptologists say. But then I read all the alternative stories, like the Great Pyramid told us they knew pi, and that it points to stars. But because of the precession of the equinoxes, it don't point to those stars. So it's not pointing to those stars, but it did point to stars. So they built this whole great big thing to point to stars, and then it's just nonsensical. And then, that the Great Pyramid was a weapon or a beacon. The aliens came all the way from Orion, but then they had to stack rocks onto a pile to somehow be a beacon to find their way back or whatever. I read all those, but then I read this privately published book that I heard about in a bunch of other books that was mentioned. Hard to get. I had to interlibrary loan it, called Pharaoh's Pump by Edward Kunkel. And he didn't talk about the Pharaoh's hat. He didn't talk about language. He didn't talk about hieroglyphs. He didn't talk about the sequence of pyramids. He talked about how the Great Pyramid was built. Edward Kunkel, and the book was Pharaoh's Pump. And he was the genesis for this, my whole life quest, and ultimately started a nonprofit foundation dedicated to furthering his research. His first book was published in 1962, and he died in the early 80s. So, but we are, carrying on his research, standing on his shoulders. And he said that the Great Pyramid was built using water locks, and that it was built to actually help people in a tangible way by being a water pump. So then I ended up writing 2 books and producing 2 documentaries and everything else. So it's been quite an adventure.
Yeah, there's something, I don't know, at least me personally, I've always found something very nihilistic about the idea that these pharaohs are going to use all this slave labor just to build elaborate tombstones for themselves. But, the idea that, they're going to construct something that's actually going to be a benefit for society and culture. I mean, it gives you a much more hopeful view of, what the pyramids could be symbolically.
Yes. Well, all hydroelectric dams around the world have passages that point to stars. But the reality is, those dams were built to help people, if you will. They built the High Aswan Dam in Egypt, and a lot of that electricity is used, believe it or not, to pump water. So they stopped the yearly inundation with the High Aswan Dam, use that generated electricity to pump water, so they can irrigate beyond the floodplain and have more than just irrigate the land more than just once in the yearly inundation. So in ancient Egypt, they needed a water pump. In modern Egypt, they also use a massive water pumping system. So it's just, it just makes sense to me that they went to that effort to have a huge return on investment, just like we built our roads and our power networks and all of that. It's infrastructure that improves our lives, and that's what the Great Pyramid was built for.
Yeah, and I mean, you've kind of alluded a few times to the idea, and I hate to call it this, but pop culture wise, the Atlantean myth, right? That there was at one point in time this one like original great society, that initial city state that was able to make all these accomplishments before they destroyed themselves. Do you think there's any credence to the idea of a civilization that was around before historical records?
Well, certainly, our species has been around a long time, and civilizations, they come and they go, and kingdoms come and go, and technologies come and go. Brain surgery. Wow, that's modern. Well, in ancient Peru and all those places, they have skulls that show brain surgery and that they've survived. So they had,
Really?
oh yes, terrapanning is what it's called. Very fascinating. And aspirin is what is made synthetically now, but it originally was from plants down in South America. So doctors up here will tell you, oh, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. But the witch doctors had people chew on the leaves that they got the same effect from aspirin. So all ancient civilizations had some rather high technologies even ancient Egypt, the Baghdad battery, they had birth control, they had C-sections, and a whole host of things we probably will never know about. Certainly there was some precision, large scale precision stone cutting that was being accomplished that Egyptology can't reproduce. So yeah, Atlantis. Yeah, there might have been. Even the Bible in the fifth generation from Adam, they were doing metallurgy, music, and a whole other host of things that a civilization would do. So and have cities. So yeah, there were probably the Atlanteans, but it's hard to say. What we're trying to do is redevelop this ancient technology of the Great Pyramid water pump to help our modern but very troubled world. If you can pump water real cheaply, you can use it to irrigate marginal farmland, you can use it to generate electricity and all of that type of thing. In fact, that's what the Great Pyramid was built for. They wanted to both irrigate and generate electricity, power machinery. So that's what we're trying to do, is redevelop that ancient it's efficient and non-polluting technology for to help have an alternative to electricity.
Huh. So I guess to kind of backtrack a little bit. So what era, where this brain surgery done in Peru? Because I know that the Romans had they would, often drill holes in the skull, like alleviate pressure and that sort of thing. Are we talking about something like along the same lines?
Well, just look up brain surgery in South America. Google that, and you'll come up with some crazy skulls that have some like 1-inch square openings and other things, and they can tell that the person survived because the injury kind of remodeled itself, if you will. So yeah, there was a lot of it, and I mean lots of examples. I was in the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia, where they have the Elephant Man and a whole bunch of other odd skeletons and things like that. And they had a lot of skulls that were from South America that had done brain surgery. They think they may have been doing it for religious purposes, because if you touch metal, like to a brain, they might have hallucinate or whatever. I mean, who knows? But the point is, the technical part, they were able to use some sort of anesthesia and perform these very exotic operations on people. It's just one example of ancient high technology that mankind was capable of doing. So it's a crazy world out there. That's not the focus of my research, but it's just something to bring up to acknowledge that there were no primitive civilizations, way back when. Certainly that includes us. We're a rather primitive civilization when you consider how we treat the environment and each other and that type of thing. So it's we're as primitive as any other civilization ever thought of being, more so maybe.
Yeah, and it seems that we kind of devolve a little bit more every day, because I mean, if you look at it, from like a grander scale, I mean, we're still just burning fossil fuels. Like, we're burning fossils that we find in the ground. There's no way that we would ever be able to sustain our society without those. Like, it would collapse overnight. But that's why I'm glad there's guys like you out there that are looking, for these alternatives. So I guess what got you into the idea of, a decentralized, energy efficient, non-polluting energy?
Well, that's what the Great Pyramid is a inspiration for. Certainly at our foundation, which we have a research facility, we know that you don't need a big stone pyramid in your backyard. We're using polypropylene containers, PVC pipe, valves, and also some custom fabrication to recreate a lot of these, the technology of the Great Pyramid water pump, certainly at a smaller scale. And we hope to make it so people can use local materials, like in the third world, like barrels and that type of thing, to ultimately be able to pump water in an efficient manner and use that pumped water for a host of purposes. So we're looking for some equipment. We have, you know, a metal lathe and an arc welder and a whole bunch of other stuff, which is quite handy. And even a guy that's helping weld for us, which is a lot more valuable than an Egyptologist, you know, because he can actually do something. And but we're looking for a plasma cutter, which would be very handy in our facility. It's like cutting steel, and also a 3D
Mhm.
printer. So if someone wants to donate either those things or the funding for those things, they can contact our nonprofit foundation. So yeah, so but we're making some sub-assemblies, components of various scales to redevelop this ancient technology. If they can do brain surgery in ancient times as well as modern times, and if they can pump water in an efficient manner in ancient times, hopefully we can redevelop it. So funding has been a struggle because you know, it's a breakthrough type technology, but we're making progress every day.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, you're actually, have a hypothesis that you're doing demonstrations to prove. That's a fantastic thing that, a lot of Egyptologists haven't been able to do so far.
I
So,
appreciate
let
that.
me ask you, was, so were these, initial designs, was that, based off of the research, originally in the Pharaoh's pump, or were these, things that you designed yourself?
Well, it's hard to make a distinction because I'm the founder of the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation, and so we developed, you know, conducted a lot of research that was compiled in both of my books. But we have, you know, board of directors, so pro bono legal counsel, research
Mhm.
library with published and unpublished materials. And if people want to donate like their book or whatever to our foundation's library, that would be great. And you know, again, a facility. So it's all, and then we have some co-researchers and other people, scholars around the globe now that we're networking with. So it's quite an operation, really.
Oh, awesome. So let me ask you, what you said you're, collaborating with other scholars and academics. So what sort of research are you hoping to accomplish in the near future? And has COVID kind of put a damper on any of that?
COVID has, again, we were going to lead a tour to Egypt, like a 13-day tour that would have been wonderful. The itinerary is still on our website, but the tour is canceled temporarily. And, you know, it was full, but we had to, you know, refund everyone's money and all of that. So, so that's a goal. And then we're also, again, working on the redeveloping this ancient water pumping technology. And those, that type of thing is the focus of our research, although there's a lot of other things that we're doing, educational, like being on shows like this to tell people that you don't have to believe what Egyptologists tell you. So you're helping spread the word with your wonderful show and that type of thing. I've written a number of magazine articles and adding to the YouTube channel, adding content for that. And we have a video series on our YouTube channel that people can watch about how the Great Pyramid was assembled using water locks and barges. So it's busy. Things are really busy right now.
I mean, that's good that, even though that one tour was canceled, it hasn't really slowed down your entire mission statement, right? Because it seems like you guys are making progress. So, so I guess let me ask you, with the fall of that past, great civilization, and the ooh, I hope not, but the inevitable fall of modern civilization. How do you think climate change kind of correlated to the building of that pyramid, and then how do you think that the developing these new energy technologies could help us avoid the same fate as possibly some older civilizations?
Well, I think through the eons, climate does change. With evil, with catastrophes like ice ages, that type of thing, even the movement of the North Pole. But in modern times, there's a lot of people, and that's again beyond the scope of my research, about man-caused climate change in the here and now, mainly through the use of fossil fuels like gasoline, coal, natural gas. But this water pumping technology certainly would alleviate some of that, because it doesn't use fossil-based combustion and have all the adverse side effects of that type of thing. So hopefully someone like a Bill Gates or will find out about this research and be able to help us improve the our progress, if you will. When they built the atomic bomb with the Manhattan Project, there was a great need for a product that they were developing, just like we're trying to develop a product, if you will, a technology.
Mhm.
But their rate of progress was pretty fast, because their budget of the Manhattan Project was unlimited. It was absolutely
Oh yeah.
unlimited. So that helped. So so if we could improve our funding, it would help our progress. So I mean, that's just with anything similar to the vaccines. They had a injection of funding, if you will, to facilitate and speed up the process to create these vaccines that they're putting out now. So but we're hanging on. We're like I say, we're doing scholarly work, we're doing hands-on work, education, and a whole bunch of other things. People can go to our website, see our mission statement and goals, activities, and if they have a question, they can email me through our website. And people, there's a lot of information to learn.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I haven't gone too deep on the website, but I definitely had a look at your YouTube channel, and there's a lot of interesting videos out there. I definitely recommend everybody, go to both www.thepump.com as well as the YouTube channel. Actually, watch some of the documentaries and kind of, get an idea of what we're talking about here, because, we're talking about water locks, we're talking about barges. But let me tell you, folks, if you go to the YouTube channel, they actually have like little animations, and it actually kind of shows you, a visual representation of what we're talking about here. So it'll actually help you kind of put this conversation in context. So I would definitely recommend checking them out. And so let me ask you, we're getting to the end here. So is there any upcoming events or projects that you'd like to let people know about in advance?
Well, we'll reschedule our tour to Egypt when things get better, if you will, and it may be a while. But I'm doing another talk show tomorrow, so if someone needs a guest, they can certainly contact me for their show. I've been again adding content to the YouTube channel and doing a whole host of things. People can subscribe to the YouTube channel, be friends on Facebook, all of that stuff. And but also I ask people is if they just find out what this is all about before you pass judgment. The most revolutionary thing you can ask somebody to do right now is to read a book.
Yeah, ain't that the
Put
truth?
put down your phone and go learn something. And don't learn this much about it. Years ago, they said a little bit of knowledge is dangerous, and don't just believe what an Egyptologist tells you or someone that believes in the Orion correlation theory or whatever. But read a book. Check my books out of the library or interlibrary, loan them if your library doesn't have it, and find out about the research before you pass judgment, and visit our website at thepump.org.
Yeah, and folks, I mean, I gotta say that I think that's one of the things that is kind of detrimental to this day and age that we're in, is that there's more misinformation out there than there is actual information. So folks, if you want to learn about this stuff, definitely recommend you actually look up credible sources, credible books, because I mean, when you get kooks out there talking about how how the pyramids are correlated to like the planet Sirius, or the Orion constellation, even though it would only be for this specific time on this specific day in this specific season. There's, especially around Egypt too, and the pyramids, there's just so much misinformation out there. It's really hard to sift through all that sometimes.
Well, this direction of research is new to most. So, we talk about how it was built and why. Now, those people that believe in correlations, they don't even address how the Great Pyramid was assembled. So, because they're just into something pointing to something. So it's a comprehensive research that addresses quite a bit about all of the mysteries about the Great Pyramid. So it's been a fun ride so far.
Awesome. Well then, folks, go to www.thepump.org. He has 2 books available now. That was I want to say The Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, and yep, that one right there. And then The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. Check out those books. They're both available at Amazon, correct?
Amazon, yeah. Soft cover or ebook, Kindle ebook format. And my 2 documentaries are on DVD, and they're also available from Amazon.com. All the links are at my website.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, folks, go to Amazon.com, check out the books, read through them. Definitely go to thepump.org. And, if you have any questions, feel free to click that contact button, reach out to Stephen, because, he's got a lot of information to share. And, I would definitely recommend also checking out that mission statement, because, Pharaoh's Pump Foundation is a 501c3. That means though anything that you donate to them is tax deductible, folks.
Well, thank you for that plug. I sure appreciate it. It means a lot to me.
Absolutely. Well, you know what, Stephen, I want to thank you for coming on the show, sharing your thoughts about the pyramids, because, it's one of those, I mean, even after, I'm dust in the wind, the Great Pyramids are still going to be one of the great mysteries of human civilization, and, just the humanity story in general. But I like to see that, maybe in my lifetime, we might actually be able to see it in proper context.
Well, I appreciate that. And I hope we will. And that's a great goal to aspire to.
All right. Thank you much, Stephen. You have a great night. And folks, check out thepump.org, because we are out of here.
Thank you.